Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me to be part of this discussion, and to the sponsors for supporting it, the volunteers and back end for making it run smoothly, and to all of you for your attention. I want to address the topic here of acknowledging the risks and challenges, at least some of them, and try to give you a few ideas on how you might go beyond acknowledging them and to try and navigate them successfully. I want to state up front that I'm not trying to give my opinion on whether AI or any technology is good or bad, or what or how you should or shouldn't use it, but to put those judgments and decisions aside for a moment, to try and consider the things on their own terms and also consider their place in your lives and whether or not they ultimately fit in. I think that perhaps the ultimate question and challenge of our age, of any age of rapid and significant technological innovation, and particularly for people in a gathering like this, is can we, and if so, how do we move forward technologically without leaving behind what we value individually and culturally? Any new major technology in our attempt to do something faster or better brings with it a lot of what we sometimes call unintended consequences. These are the things we design a tool to help us to do, and the things which end up happening, and it's almost always the case that are in our enthusiasm for the new, we get more than what we asked for or wanted. Intended effects and actual effects can be so far apart as to not resemble each other. What we call social media is a great example of this. It's become clear, and the courts are now agreeing, that what was supposed to connect us has done so only superficially, and the value for shareholders was built on algorithms which ruthlessly occupy attention and leave their users with a myriad of identity crises instead of meaningful relationships. I find a wonderful and disturbing example of this on television ads for pharmaceutical company products. You'll see a happy couple, hand in hand, strolling along the beach on a beautiful summer's day. Birds wheel overhead. The sun catches surf as it curls and gently washes to the shore, leaving behind a starfish. The couple smiles, teeth bright, laughing merrily and sharing their golden years in comfort verging on luxury. You watch this and you think, yeah, man, that's life. I want what they've got. Give me some of that. But while you're watching that, wistful, captivated, you're not really hearing the narrator reading the fine print, listing off all the truly awful and horrible things which can and likely will happen if you purchase and consume this wonder drug, or if you stop taking it once you've started. With apologies to JFK or his speechwriter, we might ask not what we can do with our technology, but what our technology might do with us. It's remarkable to think that we have any control over technology when in fact there is always a sizable gap between what we intend to use a technology for and what the technology does to us, who we become. John Culkin of Fordham University in 1965 said, "We become what we behold. We shape our tools, and thereafter our tools shape us." He was invoking the Psalms and a remark of Winston Churchill to reframe or elaborate on Marshall McLuhan's famous phrase, which he first uttered in 1958, "The medium is the message." It's a paradoxical statement which has befuddled, confused, and annoyed audiences then and probably since. A few years later, he said it this way: "The medium is what happens to you, and that is the message." The statement was a response to the information theory of communication studies, which follows the journey of a message from its sender to its receiver. This model of communication follows the message or idea from one place to another, But my grandfather discovered that communication involves a lot more than just moving information from one place to another. It's a two-way street involving transformation and change. If there's no change, there's no communication. He found conventional communication theory limited in this regard. In his remarkable study of technology and culture, Understanding Media, published in 1964, he said that the message of any medium or technology is the change in scale or pace or pattern that it introduces into human affairs. The real message of a technology, the important thing, the takeaway, is how we are changed by its introduction to our person, our family, our workplace, our church, our world. These changes can be profound and yet subtle. We often don't perceive them happening at the time, and yet the changes can be monumental. A medium carries far more than a message. It carries a culture, and not necessarily yours, with it. The problem with perception and attention is that it's severely limited. We have many human senses constantly receiving data of all kinds, and only a limited amount of attention available. It's because of this information to attention imbalance that we compartmentalize, automate, or just ignore a lot of things. Much of our lives are automated. We do a lot of things during the day, quite vital to our well-being, and yet we're normally unaware of them as long as they are or have been accepted as normal. Things like breathing, blood circulation, digestion. Our bodies are doing 1,000 or more things at any given moment, and we pay little attention. We're very conservative with our attention just because there are so many demands on it and so little of it to go around. So we make snap judgments on what's important and what's not and proceed accordingly. What gets our attention is generally what demands it at any given moment. What we pay attention to comes at the cost of what we ignore. For much of human history, change happens so slowly as to be beneath our notice. We could adapt. Generation to generation, changes were minor. This is a great strategy for a certain kind of success, and it's a strategy some communities still employ. My grandfather liked to quote Bertrand Russell as saying, "If we only raised the temperature of the bathwater by a degree every hour, we wouldn't know when to scream." It feels to me these days that rather than slipping into a comfortable bath, I'm being plunged like a lobster into a pot of boiling water. And it's not a comfortable experience. But there's a hidden advantage here, in that though it's uncomfortable, it raises something to the level of our awareness. And when we're aware, we can more easily evaluate and act. As has been the case for several generations now, ours is an age of much discomfort, but it's also consequently the greatest opportunity we've ever had for moving forward deliberately. Another challenge we have is with social media, the consequences are clear 20 years after the fact. Change is fast and understanding is slow. And as you know, you don't need to understand something for it to transform you. This makes it very difficult to know what is the right thing to do, and maybe this goes some way to explaining why we tend to almost willfully ignore thinking about it. If you knew the damage of social media, dare I say just smartphones, can do to a young person's attention, identity, body image, personality, personal cognitive and sensory, and even spiritual development, would you allow them the free use of it? Probably not. None of these outcomes were widely foreseen 20 years ago when social media promised a way to connect with people and share your life's greatest or trivial moments, the birth of a child, the foam on your latte. Another challenge we have is our assumption that a tool is a tool and what matters is how we use it. Again, in Understanding Media, Marshall addressed this by paraphrasing T.S. Eliot, who was talking about meaning in a poem. He said, "Our conventional response to all media, namely that it's how they're used that counts, is the numb stance of the technological idiot. For the content of a medium is like the juicy piece of meat carried by the burglar to distract the watchdog of the mind." It's not that content doesn't matter or have any effect. but that it's the associated form which is the major agent of change or transformation, and it paradoxically is carried by the content. This is something to consider and takes on another dimension entirely when the content in question is the Word of God. Another thing to consider is whether the average person's smartphone is a suitable container for the Word of God. As a poet, I think a lot about words. The word in thought as I consider ideas, what I'm going to say. The written word as I assemble them on a page. The spoken word as I share them with you now. I also think about the very different cultures associated with each kind of word. I was at Geneva College in Beaver Falls a couple of weeks ago for their lovely little conference, Orality and Literacy in the Life of the Soul. Orality and literacy refer to the time before we humans developed writing, making speech visible, and the very different world that the written word enabled. It's difficult to imagine a world without visual writing. We take it so much for granted. Although in the time of Jesus they had writing, it's interesting to note that we don't have any of his writing, if indeed he wrote anything. Would he use a phone? An app? I think also about the culture and world and dramatic changes brought about by the printing press, what it meant for communication and the transmission of culture. The particular culture of literacy is brought about when it was at the peak of its influence. There are many subtle but profound differences between the word on the page and the word on the screen. A major difference is that with the screen, the light comes through from behind, and with the page from in front. The user experience is different. The eye treats the word on the page differently than it does with the word on the screen, and the brain does as well. The nature and quality of experience is different all around. It's about much more than consuming content. Any translation is an approximation. My grandfather, an English professor and trained literary critic, would evaluate any author, philosopher, artist by these two terms. What is their intended audience, and what is their intended effect? Note the word intended. As we know, intents and outcomes don't always agree. I think effective agency today, meaningful action, consists in closing the gap between intended and actual effect. I appreciate speaking to an audience like this because a lot of you are people who have a clear sense of values which go deeper than mere comforts or luxuries. Because of this, you are in a different position to evaluate the relative merit of a given technology because you have something definite to hold it up against. A new technology, as my grandfather said, gradually or quickly creates a new environment, and it's this environment or surround which shapes people. We take on its shape, be it book-shaped, church-shaped, or smartphone-shaped. This new environment in turn creates a new or at least different habits, perceptual and otherwise, and habits can become traditions and become values. If you don't put your values first, you may find you've left them behind, and it's very difficult, if not impossible, to get them back. Any culture or society is a set of conditions which makes some things more or less easy or possible. The word medium, and this can be confusing for many people, at the same time means instrument and also environment. This confusion about multiple meanings of the term is the same confusion about our technologies themselves, because technologies are also at the same time instruments or tools as they are environments of services and disservices. McLuhan wrote in 1966, "The section on the medium as the message can perhaps be clarified by pointing out that any technology creates a totally new human environment. Environments are not passive wrappings, but active processes." The sort of technological environmental awareness is critical to have if you're interested not only in how AI can be incorporated into your workflow, but if you care about what the outcome will turn out to be as seen looking back a few years down the road. It's a mistake to assume that you can have your new technology and keep your culture, as we have found time after time through the ages. I have a theory about speed and depth, that they are inversely proportional. At a certain point, an increase in speed comes at a cost of depth, and the question of whether one is better than the other is complicated, depending largely on context and object. Take, for example, travel. You can walk somewhere, you can ride a bicycle, take a car, a train, a ship, an airplane. Each of these methods can accomplish the same objective of getting you from one place to another, but there are factors like time required and the nature of experience to consider. If I have a long distance to travel in a limited amount of time, for example, coming from Toronto to San Francisco, about 7 hours of flight, it makes sense to fly. Apple Maps tells me that would be 40 hours of driving straight, 70 hours by train, and it won't tell me how long to walk. But Google AI will. It says probably about 6 months. It's obvious what the sane choice is here if I want to keep married to my wife. But man, it would be great to have 2 weeks to make a road trip out of it. I'm soon going to forget my flight here and back, I hope. But I won't soon forget the drive. At the end of the day, or your lifetime, what has mattered more, getting there faster, or what's happened or not along the way? It's worth considering that we're living in a time and a set of circumstances where we have so many options and the possibilities which they entail. A century ago, flying would not have been an option, and missional electricity would have been an entirely different conference. Or would it? That's funny to think about. Our communication tools and the nature of our connected world gives us access to masses of humanity at an unprecedented and a truly awesome scale. But what is the quality of that reach? If you shout in a crowded room, a lot of people might hear, but how many listen? All media are not created equal. It's one thing to make a connection, it's another thing to deepen it. This could have been a Zoom meeting, and I could have said essentially all the same things, but it's hard to argue that they're anything like the same experience. In conclusion, any new technology, all moments of great technological change are periods of great risk and challenge. I think our moment is one of a level with the transition from orality to literacy, to the rise of the printing press, the machine and industrial age, electrification, digitization, and the internet. Periods of rapid change are extremely disorienting and uncomfortable, but this discomfort represents opportunities as things are brought up to our awareness. The only way to evaluate whether a given technology is good or bad is to be clear on your values and weigh them against each other. Is this technology likely to uphold your values or undermine them? That, to me, is the big question concerning technology. Thank you.